Let's get started, if you will. Welcome. My name is Jim Harrison, and I am the priest in charge here at St. John's, and we are happy and blessed to be able to host this event. I'd like to open us with prayer. O merciful God, grant that we, through the strength of your divine hand, might protect and serve one another. Make all forms of hatreds cease. Unmask all systems of corruption and power. Drive out all fears and prejudices in our day. You are as near as our breath, and as close to us as the contours of our hearts and minds. May your presence be a balm to those who are suffering and a bright flame to those who are causing injury. Rupture the status quo of perennial violence that infects our land, and teach us through your divine word to reject the lies of any false peace in favor of the presence of your dangerous justice. Amen.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Eric Severson, Reverend at the Unitarian Universalist Fellowship of Midland. We're so grateful for you coming out this evening. We know that gun violence is an epidemic in and of itself, affecting the United States at a disproportionate rate compared to the rest of the world. So we are gathered here as community members, faith community members, collaborating to hold a conversation for us to explore the problems, the solutions, and what we might do to bring those solutions into being. Let's see. Our evening will consist of just a few scenes. Our first segment will be Lamentations, in which we'll hear how gun violence has affected one family, in particular in our area. We'll then move to Solutions with a panel presentation of local professionals in their areas, providing us some truth about gun violence, what works, what doesn't, in prevention. And then we'll move toward action and discuss what can we actually do about the problem. All right, let's begin further with a candle lighting. We kindle this flame in lamentation of the losses we have known to gun violence. We kindle this flame in celebration of our time together, united in spirit. We kindle this flame as together we move beyond thoughts and prayers to seek active solutions for a better world.
And now we'll open with a song from Angela Garcia. The song, interestingly enough, is called Beyond Thoughts and Prayers.
If we just talk of thoughts and prayers and don't live out a faith that dares, and don't take on the ways of death, our thoughts and prayers are fleeting breath. If we just dream of what could be and do not build community and do not seek to change our ways, our dreams of change are false displays. If we just sing of doing good and do not walk through our neighborhood to learn its hope, to ease its pain, our talk of good is simply in vain. God, may our prayers and dreams and songs lead to a faith that takes on wrongs, that works for peace and justice too. Then will our prayers bring joy to you.
As a community, it is easy to question why have a National Gun Violence Awareness Weekend. I'm certain we feel inundated on a daily basis with gun violence stories. But what we do not realize is how many of these stories never make the headlines, nor do we hear how these local families and communities must reshape their lives after such an event. Tamara Tucker is a local parent who has lived through the toll of gun violence and has stood up to say we must take care of our communities and the families facing the tragedies brought on by gun violence. I first met Tamara 2 years ago at a Wear Orange event. I was overwhelmed by her courage to share her story, and even more by her willingness to step forward to lead the Saginaw parents of murdered children. Somehow, she has found the strength to show up over and over again for the families of the Saginaw area and help them find a path forward. Please welcome Tamara Tucker.
Good evening, everyone. And thank you for inviting me and to listen to the stories that I have, well, the life that I have to live now. In 1990, I was 15. I lost my brother to gun violence then, and that was something that I was not prepared to do, because now I have to be the older sibling. I wasn't prepared for that. But not just that, I had to watch my mom. Try to raise us and continue to raise her family through that large defeat. That year, it was so many murders and deaths in Saginaw County alone. And I remember telling my mother that when I got old enough, that I was going to change that. I didn't understand to the amount that I would have to change that. Losing my daughter in 2019, that was it felt like a large defeat. It felt like as a parent I had failed my daughter. You know, she would call me for any and everything. And that time, she wasn't able to call me. I wasn't able to get there. I had to live with that. I had to get past that. And in order to get past that, I had to make sure that her life didn't go in vain. She was raising 3 beautiful, beautiful sons. And she just kept telling me, Mom, I was questioning her on their names, but she kept saying, Mom, they're my 3 kings. I want to make sure that they live their lives as such. So I'm raising her youngest one. His name is Kayin Khalil. He was 5.5 months when she was murdered. I wasn't prepared for that. I was prepared to be a grandmother. I wasn't prepared to be the surrogate mother of my grandson. Her 2 older children, at the time they were 3 and 4, they are with their dad. And yes, it's a lot to go with that. No, their dad did it, you know. Things didn't go well in her marriage, so she started dating again. And it's hard to date after that, but not knowing that the guy that she was dating would be the guy that murdered her. Yes. So he's the father of the baby that I'm raising. I can remember telling, at the victim impact statement, telling him that I forgave him. Because in order to live, in order to love this baby that's going to need me 100%, I had to forgive him. Because one day I'm going to have to let him know what happened. He's going to ask me. And in order for me to give him the best life that I can possibly give him, I have to love him without any doubt. I have to love him and see past all the ugly and the hurt that his dad caused. Not he caused, but his dad. And he's a beautiful 4-year-old now, and he calls me Go-Go. And I always say because I'm a grandma on the go. But to make light of the situation, yes, it's hard. I had to rake and scrape my mind to figure out this new normal that I had to live. It wasn't easy. It was hard. It's hard even now when I have to go and travel hundreds of miles to go pick his brothers up because they no longer live here in Michigan. So I have to pick his brothers up so they can spend the summer together. So again, the dynamics of our family has changed tremendously. You know, you don't ever think or dream or fathom that something like this could happen, but there is light at the end of the tunnel. When I say, that year I remember saying, my faith is my weapon. I didn't know to the extent or why I had to say that, but I felt that wholeheartedly in every being of me. My faith is my weapon was because I had to stand on my faith. I had to stand on my faith to get me through. I had to live moment to moment. It was minute to minute. Because now I can breathe. Oh, I lived through this 5 minutes. Because who want to ever imagine not having their children in their lives? I was never, ever supposed to bury my oldest child, ever. So now, I live for other families too. I live to make sure that they see, yes, I'm strong when I need to be, but when it's time to cry, I cry. When my heart is broken because I see that, oh man, she would have enjoyed seeing her boys. And they're so smart. They're so smart. She was always a stickler about education. She wanted to make sure that they had the best education, and I'm gonna make sure and see to that. And that's for any of the other families that have to deal with the gun violence. It may take away our loved ones, but it won't ever wipe out their memories. It will never wipe out the legacy that we're willing to carry on for them. Thank you.
As I mentioned in the very beginning introduction of Tamara, she is a leader with the parents of murdered children in Saginaw. And I would encourage you to have some conversations with her afterwards, because that is a group that shows up for parents when parents are facing the type of grief that Tamara just talked about. And they show up and they say, what do you need? And they're there to help that family get through that initial shock and that initial grief in terms of, like Tamara said, burying a child. And then they're there again, and they're there again. So we are incredibly appreciative of all the work that they're doing in our community to try to help families deal with gun violence. So the Wear Orange Gun Violence Awareness Week is both about honoring the lives taken by gun violence and also about joining together to say we can solve this problem. So this evening, we're joined by 3 community professionals who see gun violence issues and safety from 3 different perspectives. Each will share their thoughts on how a community can best address gun violence. After they have each spoken, there will be a time for questions and answers. So our 3 panelists, our first one is Midland Police Officer Gunner Wright, who also serves as the School Resource Officer for Dow High and Woodcrest Elementary. Officer Wright is a graduate of Ferris State University and has been a police officer since 2017. Officer Wright is also a veteran of the U.S. Army National Guard, where he served as an infantryman. Judy McAtee has lived in Midland for 32 years, where she and her husband Andy raised 4 children. Judy is a recently retired licensed master social worker who specialized in psychotherapy and has a certification as a brain injury specialist. Throughout her career, she has worked in hospice care, brain injury rehabilitation, and for the last 25 years provided mental health counseling in a private practice in Midland and Saginaw. Judy has been a very active volunteer in the Midland community, serving on the boards of several youth-oriented organizations. And then our third panelist is Wendy Schultz. Wendy is the program manager for the suicide prevention team at the Alida E. Lutz VA Center in Saginaw. She has over 23 years' experience as a clinical social worker. Wendy graduated from CMU with a Bachelor of Science in Psychology and Sociology, along with a concentration in social work, and then completed her MSW at Grand Valley State University. In her role at the Saginaw VA, Wendy provides veteran-specific suicide prevention education and trainings to veterans and their family members, community agencies, faith-based organizations, first responders, clinical providers, and medical providers. This is Wendy's second time to speak at one of our events, and we appreciate her willingness to return.
This is Wendy. I will go ahead and get started. For the suicide prevention team at the Saginaw VA. When we think of gun violence, obviously we think of death by homicide or other means of that. One of the things, though, that is surprising to me when I started taking over this role is the number of death by suicides with gun violence. And quite honestly, the number is almost double. People die by death by suicide with a firearm than death by homicide with a firearm. So when we think of gun violence, we also need to think of how do we help with suicide prevention. And so gun ownerships, someone who has a gun in their home, they're not necessarily more likely to have mental health issues than non-gun owners. However, having a gun in your home does increase the likelihood of a death by suicide. For males, it increases it by 3 times, and for females in that home, it increases it by 7 times. And one of the big reasons for that is because for the first time that you start to have thoughts of wanting to die by suicide, the thoughts happen fast. And so you're acting on it pretty quickly. For 24%, you're acting on those thoughts within 5 minutes. And then for 48%, you're acting on those thoughts within 20 minutes. And for 71%, it's within an hour. So one of the things that you immediately start to think of is, what do I have in my home that I could use? And if you have a gun in your home, that's quickly where your thoughts are going to go, and you're going to utilize that. And unfortunately, the first time that you use a gun to attempt to death by suicide, it is 85 to 90% fatal. And then of course, that 10 to 15% that survive is going to have some significant medical issues. If you add all the other means of attempting to die by suicide together, the first time that you attempt to use those, all the other means combined, which is, everything else you can think of overdosing, jumping off bridges, hanging, any other means of wanting to die by suicide, it's 5% fatal the first time that you use that. So having a gun in your home, one of the things, so what can we do about that? One of the things that we can, and what does work, is lethal means safety, or storing your firearms and your guns safely and securely. That means having a gun lock on them, or putting them in a gun safe, or even storing your ammunition in one spot and your guns in another spot. That is helpful for that, and that's one of the #1 methods that we can use. And oftentimes as adults or parents, we have a loaded or unlocked gun in our house and we put it away somewhere and we think it's out of sight and out of mind. I will tell you, anyone else in that home knows where that is and knows how to find it quickly. And or your children may be trained and have gun safety and all that, but then can you guarantee every other child that comes on over has that same training? And or if those thoughts start to take over, wanting to die by suicide, they might find that gun. So it's really, really important that we do store our firearms safely and securely in our home. I did bring some gun locks. There are plenty back there. If we run out, I will be more than happy to get more of them for you. The other thing that, that we really can focus on and what can we do is really a change in culture, meaning that suicide prevention really is everyone's business. Most of the people that die by death by suicide are not connected to mental health services. So oftentimes we think it has to be a mental health professional to connect with them that first time. Quite honestly, it can be any one of us, just having a conversation, checking on someone, saying hi, asking those questions, and then helping get them connected to a mental health professional for that further assessment on that. But we really do need to provide more trainings and really normalize it and decrease the stigma and be able to talk about it with everyone. And how messaging matters and how we do that and having those conversations. Thankfully, most gun owners are actually very open and wanting to store them safely in their home. And so it's usually a pretty easy conversation to have with someone.
I'm Judy McTee and newly retired. So I had to do a little review of some of the statistics, and some of them are already given, so I'll kind of not go over that. That's okay. One of the things that I think I was kind of asked to talk about specifically was we hear over and over and over that this isn't a gun issue. This is a mental health issue, right? You've all heard that, and I know that you've all heard that over and over in the news. You know, thoughts and prayers. Let's beef up the mental health system. Let's do more to help our mental health clients. Do we have a mental health issue in the U.S.? Absolutely, absolutely. We have a serious mental health issue. Is it any higher than other countries? No. The statistics show over and over and over that, as a matter of fact, I think last I looked, of all the countries, we're somewhere in the middle, I think, of height of the level, the percentage of mental health illness compared to other countries. As a matter of fact, we're equal to many of the countries that have very, very strict gun laws, and they don't have anywhere near, I mean, almost completely decreased as far as gun deaths. In the U.S., we will never solve the problem of gun violence in America by quote unquote fixing mental health. We're just not going to. The statistics show it over and over. If you look at research, like reliable research, not just somebody's opinion, but research shows over and over, whether it's AMA, the American Medical Association, APA, American Psychological Association, whether it's the government does a lot of research on this. They are all showing over and over that people with mental illness on the whole are not dangerous people. The majority of people with mental health issues are not dangerous people. In fact, serious mental illness, if it suddenly and magically disappeared. Now I'm talking psychosis, schizophrenia, people with real chronic, habitual depression or domestic violence issues related to mental health. If that disappeared, if it just really disappeared, gun deaths would only decrease by 4%. So magically, nobody has depression, nobody has the serious mental illnesses, and depression can be a very serious mental illness. So more than 90% of gun deaths would still occur if that magically disappeared. So that statement that this is a mental health issue, not a gun issue, it just doesn't hold up in statistics. Over and over, it just doesn't hold up. There are some really startling statistics, as she had mentioned. 4.6 million U.S. kids live right now in a home where there's at least one unloaded and unlocked gun. That's a lot of children in a home. And that's the ones we know. Those are the reported ones. As I'm sorry, your name?
Wendy.
Wendy said, the statistics of you being killed by a gun or by suicide, your self-harm or somebody else, raises significantly just by having a gun in the home. And the death rate is almost very significantly, I can't give you the number, higher that it's your own gun that's going to kill you. And you've probably heard those statistics. It's the gun, somebody enters your home, they'll get your gun. You might have a gun to protect yourself. And maybe you can speak to that a little more, but that gun is more likely to be taken away from you, and then you are going to get killed by your own gun. So do we need to work on mental health? Absolutely. Do we need to refund and increase our funding in mental health? Absolutely. But that's a different issue. That's a different public health issue. And they can go hand in hand. But if But one thing we do know in the mental health field is that prevention is probably the biggest, it'll have the biggest effect on decreasing gun violence. That can be anything from interventions with a mental health provider, talking to your pastor, talking to your friend, but prevention would be getting the guns out of dangerous people's hands. As a mental health professional over the years, my hands were tied so many times, and I think Ziggy can probably speak to this as well. We have a duty to warn as a mental health professional. If somebody says to me in my office, I am going to kill myself or I'm going to kill someone else, and here's my plan. Now I can call maybe a psychiatrist, or I can call the family. I can intervene without their permission. Now, as a mental health professional, I'd always say, you've just told me something very disturbing, and I want to protect you, and I want to protect your family or whoever, and I am going to report this. As a mental health professional, it's always a scary thing sitting in an office like when somebody says that. But overall, if I have somebody come in my office and say, I'm really, really depressed, and I would always say, do you have guns in the home? And if they say yes, boy, do I want to call somebody, but I can't. Right now, I can't. Now, thank you, Governor Whitmer. The red flag laws have just been passed. We don't have a clue what that looks like yet. But it looks like it's going to give mental health professionals, police officers, I believe, and even family members, if it's done right and if it's followed, and if our people in charge, especially our police officers, comply with that, it could save a lot of lives. And so I'm hoping that when that gets laid out, I can't wait to see it. But that will be one more step. What can we do in our community, of course, is red flag laws. Not only just put those into effect, follow through with those. If I have a child in my office that says they're going to hurt themselves, I've had lots of success then having a parent come in, especially if they're underage. I'm allowed to have a parent come in then and ask about guns and have them removed. But it gets a little beyond mental health. Being a brain injury specialist that I treated a lot of folks with brain injuries from car accidents or even sometimes self-harm where they tried to kill themselves and didn't, but now they have a brain injury. And my husband's a neuropsychologist, so I'm very familiar with the cognitive deficits that occur from brain injury. I can have a client that I know just by talking to them and working with them for years. Brain injury folks are often in therapy for years. They have no business having a gun. They're not harmful. They're not even depressed, some of them, and they're not telling me they're going to hurt anybody. But on a neuropsych eval, they have lack of inhibition. They have impulsivity. They don't have enough, Ziggy, help me out, where you can't think things through right. They just, that this person could act impulsively. Not even thinking they're going to hurt somebody. The cognition isn't there. The memory isn't there often. And I'm hoping that red flag laws will help, that maybe we can have a way that we won't be crossing over HIPAA, that we will be then protecting them and their families. But in my years of practice, unless somebody came in and said, I am going to kill Mr. Smith because he injured me in a car accident, and I'd say, what is your plan? Well, I don't have a plan. It's just I really want to kill him. There's nobody I could report that to without then my career being on the line because I've broken HIPAA and crossed the line. So some of the red flag laws are awesome, and we need to get those going, and I'm anxious to see those lay out and see how that's going to work. And from what I'm reading, it's going to give parents, teachers, police officers a lot more leeway to intervene. I have had some success. I did have a brain injury client that had a gun, got arrested for shooting it up in the air, and the gun was taken away from him. Well, he very quickly and easily got a hold of another gun, and again, used his gun not to hurt anybody, but inappropriately. And I had a call from a police officer in my office, and together, and I want to emphasize this, together, we worked together. And my client gave me permission to talk with him over the phone, and that police officer was able to go with him because he wasn't going to go on his own. If he had been left alone, he agreed that the police officer would go with him. He got control of where he wanted those guns, who he wanted to have those guns, which was his mother. And his mother then called me, and we had made a plan that she was going to keep those guns. It worked beautifully. It really did. But that's probably a rare situation where that worked. And then I will tell you that years later, he got access to a gun again. It's just so easy to get access to a gun. And so we really do need some way to allow clinicians to, contact and keep us all safe, keep our clients safe and and their families safe. We talk about mental health, and we do understand that the mental health of a mass murder, the mass murders that are happening, those frequently have a mental health component to it. And maybe that's why it gets put out there so often, but that's still an extremely small percent. 4%, I think 4%, it's consistently in all the research shows that 4% of mass murderers even mass murderers have a mental health, diagnosed mental health issue that right now would be allowable to remove the gun from them. Very small. It's very small. And so I get really worked up when I hear over and over and over that this isn't a gun issue. Don't take our guns away. We're reliable. We're smart. They're saying it's a mental health issue. Yes, we have a mental health issue. I never want to negate that. It's a different issue. We have a gun issue. Guns are too accessible. Too many children. 80% of children who do commit suicide, that 80% of those children's gun was their parents' gun. And they knew where it was, as you were saying. They knew where it was. They knew how to get to it. And there's a slight increase with children who are around the age of 12, 13, where they just learned hunting skills. They took the class. So now they know how to handle the gun. And they know where that gun is. And often you'll hear parents, in hindsight, say, they had the gun safety. I know my child. I never thought, I showed him where the case was. I showed him where the key was. Because he knew what he was, we knew he was going to be responsible. But they didn't know that, he was either struggling or something was going on where he did commit suicide. A story I'll just share real quickly. When I lived in Indiana, a boy around the corner from us, middle school, so probably about 14 maybe, had a sleepover with a bunch of guys. Alcohol was involved, very drunk. They played Russian roulette. That gun was in a case, and it wasn't loaded. But the son knew, he was a hunter with his dad, knew how to get in that case, loaded the gun, and they played Russian roulette. And one of the boys, of course, that died. It was tragic. What we often forget, and I think our mom that spoke said it very well, the families, there's your mental health issue. There's where depression there's where the siblings or the survivors of all these mass murders, that's where those mental health issues really increase. Those kids have a grief beyond. They have post-traumatic stress disorder. If anybody listened to the recent NPR on the Uvalde shootings, the mental health problems coming out of those kids and their parents is just horrendous, and they're not getting treatment. They're not getting treatment. The parents were allowed X amount, very few sessions of therapy for their kids, and now they have to pay out of their pocket because the government or their insurance wouldn't pay anymore. So what can we do? What can we do? First of all, it's very clear. We need some laws to protect and to lock up our guns, and for people that we know are dangerous. Repeat offenders, people with true psychosis or who have a history of domestic violence. That is one really big one. So that we can protect both them and the people that they may harm. We also need to vote the way that our conscience and our beliefs are about gun safety, about the laws that we want to protect. We need to also educate. I have a nephew who absolutely voted because he was sure his guns were going to be taken away. He's a hunter. He's a very safe hunter. But that disbelief that politicians are going to, not going to take their guns away, we need to educate It's the laws we want to protect, not necessarily to take your guns away. Look at Michigan. We are a hunting state. Nobody's trying to tell you you can't hunt. We're trying to, again, we need to keep our guns safe. So voting is a very important, I think, aspect to keeping ourselves safe against gun violence. By voting in the politicians who want to go ahead and protect and put into practice the bills that will help protect. And then clinicians, we clinicians, we need to do a little better job. I was just talking to Ziggy about our forms that you fill out when a client first comes to you. We ask lots of questions, lots of intimate questions. I've never seen on our form, do you have guns in your home? It should be on our forms. It really should be on our forms. May not ever use it, may never need to, but then I don't, then I do know, and as I'm working with a client, if they look violent or expressing any kind of aggression, I know that I need to have a very serious conversation with them about the guns. So there's a lot we can do in the community, and I think you mentioned quite a few, and I think we'll talk about a lot of the other ones. But prevention, I think, is one of the biggest keys, and that's where we need these laws, is to prevent and to protect, especially our children, but everybody. I have a lot more, but I'm going to pass the
All right. So the topic that I was asked to discuss is school safety measures for a safer environment. I'm the school resource officer full-time at Dow High, and then I go back and forth between there and Woodcrest Elementary. Three concepts fundamental, I believe, to school security are physical security, preparedness, and reporting. What we're doing at Midland Police Department as well as MPS for physical security, we have 4 school resource officers, 1 at each high school and 1 at each middle school. In all of those buildings, there's secure entrances with Raptor visitor management system. So every time you check into the building, you have to present an identification which notifies everyone that has the Raptor device that this person is in this school. Effective October of 2022, we got the Evolve weapon scanner systems implemented. Basically imagine a metal detector, but it detects shapes of firearms and lethal weapons, bombs, things of that nature. I don't know specifically how it works, but you can do the research online yourself if you're interested in learning more about that. And then MPD building security threat assessments. So all 4 school resource officers during spring break, prior to spring break, did security threat assessments on every building, and using our training and experience, looked and saw weak points in some of the schools that we worked at, and presented a presentation to the MPS school board to work in coordination with them to fix some of those things that we think maybe could be worked on. In addition to that, I believe, with the exception of maybe a few doors at MPS, door boots have been installed if we go into a lockdown. The door boot is a bracket that's installed on the interior of the door, and students and teachers, if they're notified to put the boot in, it will sink into the floor, so you cannot open the door without a special tool or somebody from inside the classroom opening it itself. Preparedness, Alice. So everyone of the 4 school resource officers, as well as the administrative staff, the vast majority at least at MPS, are ALICE instructors. ALICE stands for Alert, Lockdown, Inform, Counter, and Evacuate. And we'll be running refresher courses for teachers prior to the start of next school year. As far as preparedness for students goes, they are required, I'm not sure if it's by law or by policy, but they're required to have 5 fire drills, 3 violent intruder drills, and 2 tornado drills. And with those 3 violent intruder drills, I make sure that I go class to class, check all the doors that I possibly can, and look inside to make sure they're taking it seriously. I think in past years there was a tendency to say, oh, it's just a lockdown, but as we've seen, it's a lot more serious than that. So the more prepared we are in the unlikely event that were to ever occur, I would hope that they are prepared enough and take it serious enough to act the same as how they practice. So this year, the development of the Rescue Task Force. So the Rescue Task Force is a group of police, fire, and EMS personnel with enhanced training in responding to violent intruder or active shooter incidents. So we work together in coordination with each other to not necessarily have EMS and fire and life-saving equipment on the exterior of the scene. If we find that it is a warm zone, there's no active threat in that zone, but there are injured people, police will escort EMS and fire personnel in and provide security while they render aid to injured people. And then reporting. So I think this 100% goes along with what you two said. Identifying concerning behavior. Students are encouraged to report suspicious behavior to both me and any of the principals. In addition to that, Okay to Say is something that's been implemented MPS-wide. That's a program that was developed by the Michigan State Police. It's an anonymous tip line, and the way it works, any number of things that you might find concerning. Hey, this person had a bad day today, or hey, I witnessed this crime. And it'll get forwarded through Michigan State Police intelligence, which in turn gets forwarded to us, and then we conduct an investigation with the information we receive on that tip line. And we've found that it's been very successful, especially with high school aged kids that are not necessarily interested in coming to a police officer and I guess the tattling on their friends, you know. So that's been effective, and I look forward to that being pushed out a lot more next school year. And then any threats of violence are immediately investigated by myself or one of the other SROs in coordination with Midland Public Schools administration. So for me, it would be the direct line. I would, if I got information that there was a threat in my school, I would immediately inform Mr. Doan, who's the assistant principal. We would inform the superintendent or the assistant superintendent, and then together we would develop a plan of action. Even if it's not criminal, we like to call it a protective investigation. So if there's, you know, a second grader saying, hey, I'm gonna beat you up, maybe that's not as credible as, hey, I have a knife and I'm bringing it to school. So we work together to figure out how we need to wade through some of that information and determine credibility. Successful school safety plans involve joint coordination between staff, students, police, and the community. Remaining vigilant and reporting concerns is paramount in maintaining a safe atmosphere for staff and students to both teach and learn. Thank you.
I have a quick question. Since implementing all the safety measures at the school, especially the scanners, how often do you find weapons in backpacks or on people?
So I think we're blessed to live in a community where we have extremely low violent crime. To date, since October, I have found no weapons coming into Dow High. I am trying to think if there's even been one incident at any other school, but it's a great group of kids that, for the most part, are really, really well behaved and have good heads on their shoulders. So there was, and I can't speak on determinations of where the school chooses to allocate those resources. I know there was talk of possibly moving those during times that there's football games and things like that. It's just a logistical issue. They're very new, and they're generally a little bit sensitive if you move them large spaces. They have to be spot on from one scanner to another. So you would have to get there probably several hours early and set it up for it to be effective. But I know that was something that was being talked about.
Okay, you've talked about having it at both high schools and both junior highs. What is happening with the elementary schools?
Again, the funding that's allocated is by the school district. I don't know what the funding looks like or what the future plans are for implementing those in the elementary schools. That would probably be a superintendent question.
Well, okay, I'm talking about, you said you're a resource officer?
Yes.
Do the elementary schools get any of that kind of care?
The elementary schools have the same singular entrance. They do not have the evolved weapon scanner systems in that. With that being said, I don't want to quote myself on this, but the likelihood of a child that age, I don't know if statistically the data shows that that's a niche group of people that are very dangerous. You have K through 5. I'm sure there's isolated incidents, but I'm sure that probably goes into why they're implemented middle school and high school.
So did the resource officers participate in any of the elementary schools?
Yes, so the elementary schools, me in particular, I did Woodcrest security threat assessment. That, for example, one of the issues that we ran into were something as simple as the two-way mirrors on the corners of the hallways were not tilted in an effective way. So if we needed to come in there, we can't see down that other hallway. So it was very meticulous, and I'm sure that Mr. Penix, with all of my recommendations, was very pleased with me. But yes, they did get much care, and I'm over there. I'm the DARE officer at Woodcrest, so over there at least once a week, and then I stop by for drop off and pick up.
One thing I want to mention that you brought up that's really important is the stigmatization of mental health issues. It's another, and I'm not going to answer your question right away, but it's another hindrance with grabbing such hold to it's a mental health issue. It only reinforces a greater stigmatization by saying, gun violence is related to mental health. And it just reinforces that stigma, the stigma that people are crazy and that gun deaths are only with the mental health. It's only a mental health issue. And that's why a lot of mental health professionals in the mental health communities gets really upset about the fact that it's a mental health issue, because it will decrease. It does decrease people coming in and seeking help. And like you said, especially gun owners. And that's something I'm sure that they will look at. It really hasn't been spelled out yet. Every state can have a little variation of their gun laws, by the way. I just discovered that there's no real packed one gun red flag laws. But, again, it sounds like he was an underage child. So as a clinician, you definitely need to be bringing in parents and educating parents. But again, we as clinicians have to learn how to be respectful of culture and be respectful of values, because if we come in, of course, attacking, they'll take their son home and never seek help again. It's a sensitive topic in a lot of communities. Where else do we have days off from school to go hunting? Hunting days in Michigan, and that's culturally that's our culture. So if we start saying we're going to take guns away, and that's why the education of we're not taking your guns away, we are taking them away because you have somebody in your home, or we would like to have you remove them because you have somebody in the home dangerous, somebody that could hurt other people, somebody that could help hurt themselves. Again, we want to remove those guns because you have a vulnerable person in your home. But it's difficult. But at that point, you have to get the parents involved. And because he's underage, we can do that. I mean, mental health profession, the child's not a legal guardian yet, so we can get their parent in the office, and we should get their parent in the office. Not scold, but to educate. Otherwise, I don't have a real good answer. Do you have a good answer?
I don't know if it's a good answer. One of the things, I don't work with minors that often. I work now with adults. And it's actually pretty challenging in Michigan to remove guns from a home. And we don't, quite honestly, in my over 30 years in the field, 23 years and more of this role, I removed 0 people's guns. I make that pretty clear right from the get-go. That is not my goal. But my goal is to help you store them responsibly and safely in your home. And one of the things that I kind of compare it to is like drunk driving, for example. If you're out at the bar, you're with a buddy, and your buddy gets up, he's had quite a few shots, he's like staggering, he's slurring his speech, he's like, I'm out of here, and he grabs his keys and he goes to walk away. What are you gonna do? Thankfully, they all answer correctly in that situation. They're like, of course, I'm gonna drive, I'm not gonna let him drive, I'm gonna take him home. And I'm like, you're right. Did you remove his license from him permanently? No. Did you take his car away from him? No. But you helped get him home so he didn't hurt himself or other people in that moment. That's how I'm looking at this with gun safety, is how can we store them responsibly so that you don't hurt yourself or someone else. And then I talk about it, I mean, there's certain times that, especially with adults, that you're more likely going to need that than other times. And so even though you're struggling with depression or anxiety and you need to store them responsibly for that, doesn't mean that you still can't go target shooting or you can't go hunting. But it really depends on where your mood is at that day. And we talk about how to really check into that and do that. And oftentimes they'll come back like a few oh, I'm fine, but they'll come back a few sessions later and go, you know what, you're right, the other day I was struggling, my dark thoughts started to take over, so I put all my guns in my gun safe, or I called my dad and he came over and got them, or I did this or that. So a lot of it really is starting to open that window too with it, and just having those open and non-judgmental conversations with them about it.
As a mother, you know, when our kids are making new friends and we ask questions, one of the questions I asked before a child could go to spend the night at somebody's house, I actually, and we were probably not liked for this, but we asked, do you have guns in the home? I wanted to know that. You know, it's like, I wanted to know if my kids are going to your home, do you have guns in your home? And if there was a yes, it would be like, where do you store them? How do you store them? Parents are afraid to ask those questions, I think, overall. Like, oh, the parent's going to not like me, or, you know, they're not going to let me child play with your child. I didn't care. I didn't care. I wanted to make sure that I knew what was going on in a home where my children were going to go play and sleep over, especially.
But we'd like to have Kathy come up and give us some ideas about potential actions.
One of the things that this has been great tonight, just to see all of the conversation and the questions and the amount of information that's been shared. And just to add one more piece, Officer Wright, through the MPS schools, have adopted the Be Smart program. And I know that Officer Wright has the cards, and it's all about educating parents on secure storage. So that's been a great partnership that we've been able to form with the schools to have it become a community issue, to say this is what the community can do to make Officer Wright's job and the school's job more doable and safer. So as we mentioned earlier, this weekend is both about honoring families and communities forever changed by gun violence, but also pledging that we can do better. So how do we do that? Edward Everett Hale once said, coming together is a beginning, keeping together is progress, but working together is success. So let's use our voices together. Let's use our energy together. Let's use our problem-solving skills together. Reach out to policymakers and legislators through phone calls, emails, and letters. Let them know that we need funding for grassroots efforts to address gun violence. Look for groups which fit your values that are already addressing the gun violence issue and offer support. And perhaps most importantly, have conversations in your neighborhood circles about responsible gun ownership, about secure gun storage, about the ideas shared by our panelists this evening. We are the Great Lakes Bay region, and gun violence is an issue that we can solve together.
Angela and I will share a song now titled Weave by Rosemary Crow. I invite everyone to join in the chorus once you pick it up.
Weave, weave, weave us together in unity and love. Weave, weave, weave us each one different from the other, but we are entwined with one another in one great tapestry. Weave us together, weave us together in unity and love. Weave us together, weave us together, together in love. We are different instruments playing our own melodies, each one tuning to a different key, but we are all playing in one harmony, in one great symphony. Weave us together, weave us together in unity and love. Weave us together, weave us together, together in love. A moment ago we did not know our unity, only diversity. Now the Spirit in me greets the Spirit in me, in one great family. Weave us together, weave us together in unity and love. Weave us together, weave us together, together in love.
Thank you all. Well, thank you again for joining us this evening. I thought it was a fantastic conversation. We want to thank our speakers, thank Angela, thank St. John's, and thank you all for attending for this important conversation. And we invite, as Kathy said, you all to lend your voice to solving this community issue. Let's extinguish our chalice, our flame this evening. As we extinguish this flame, let us carry in our hearts the fire of a shared commitment to ending gun violence as we know it, united in the achievable dream of a kinder, safer, more loving and peaceful world. Amen.
I echo Eric's thanks for all of you to take some time out of a beautiful Friday afternoon or Friday evening to come for such an important conversation. We're going to go beyond these walls, right? Everything that we talked about tonight is meaningless if it stays in this room. And so I invite you to think about all of the things that you've heard this evening, all of the potential ways that you can continue the conversation with all of the various ways in which you have contact or affinity groups, whether it's a church, whether it's a quilting group that you sit around and talk and want to try to fix the world, or a men's group that will indeed solve the world's problems, right, as they drink coffee. Take this conversation to where you live, in all the places in which you live. And one, just don't be silent. That's what we ask. Don't be silent. Be in conversation with one another. And so I have two prayers for us as we go. One indeed is against silence. Thank you all.